What's up, everybody? Last but not least, this is episode 4 of 4, live from ETH Denver with Messari's new developer-focused crowdcast, where we're going to be going deep on different technical trends, some of what we're building on the Messari side of things, and just generally getting Web 2 developers excited about converting to the dark side of Web 3. So as part 4 of this conversation, we're going to talk about the sexiest topic of the weekend, which is everything DAO and NFT infrastructure related. I think the convergence of those two ecosystems, they're starting to mesh together as well. So with me again to discuss this trend and some of what we're doing in this space is our head of engineering, VP of engineering, Diran, who you may recognize from the previous 3 episodes, and the founder of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, Austin Dao, Atx Dao, and one of our senior engineers and the primary tech lead on our Governor product, Malcolm. So Malcolm, thanks for joining us for this one.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start just by talking a little bit, about Messari Governor. Messari Governor is something that you two work pretty closely on for Q4. Basically, kind of collapses all things DAO governance related, from proposal to snapshot votes to kind of on-chain execution. Puts it in an easy interface for people to kind of connect their wallet, vote, delegate shares, or delegate tokens. But voting is probably like the most basic and least sexy thing that's going on in the DAO landscape. It's a critically important piece of connective tissue and architecture. But instead of talking about that, there's cooler things that have real where we can tell the narrative, I think, a little bit more about what's going on in the space versus just that infrastructure that I think practitioners will use from the governor standpoint. So instead of talking about the Messari product that you built, let's talk about Atx Dao, because that really sits at the intersection, I think, of the rest of the conversation, which is DAOs and NFTs, and where the convergence is and where some of these opportunities are going to be, not only for many, many years, but particularly for this weekend as people think about how quickly could I spin up an application and an MVP and kind of develop a cool use case. These are two of the areas that have mainstream appeal and I think give people the ability to move pretty quickly with experiments. So.
Yeah, totally. And I think both have come a really long way. From the NFT side, I think there's been so much repetition on how to launch a collection, how to issue an NFT, the standardization around the data. So from that perspective, that one's been pretty much, for the most part, solved for. I think once you get into the fringe use cases of the data that you store on an NFT and how you actually want to structure the NFT, that gets a little bit more complex. But for the most part, that's the more basic concept in the universe. Whereas DAOs is very fluid. DAOs have to decide, what does it mean to be a DAO? Where does the money stay? How do we govern? So there's a lot more question marks. Unlike NFTs, when there's an ERC 721, framework and kind of VIP that's been vetted and that everyone uses, for DAOs, there's no rule book. You can't Google how to launch a DAO. Well, you can, but you might not find great results. So in that sense, there's a lot to figure out on the DAO side, a lot more ambiguous. And even for DAOs, there's a lot of different use cases. You see a lot of, across the spectrum, there's investment DAOs, there's social DAOs, there's DAOs for protocols, and so for that one, there's a lot more to consider.
I've heard a one-liner that I think is fair, but I'd be curious if you'd have a better one, which is DAOs are essentially subreddits with bank accounts.
I think it's a pretty good and accurate statement.
Okay. So from there's a lot of jumping off points, right?
Yep.
To your point, you can have an investment DAO where that's probably a much more professional subreddit, where you could have a real degen DAO where they issue their own token, and it's got game-like mechanics to get people excited and kind of FOMO in because they want to be part of the crowd. Talk about Austin Dao, Atx Dao, and some of the convergence between the NFTs that were issued, how that's used. Just give people an example of one possibility of a community DAO that's been created and all the experimentation going on around that. Sure.
Yeah. So just a brief history on Atx Dao. Atx Dao is a city DAO based out of Austin, Texas. And the goal of Atx Dao is to create a strong, tight-knit local community within Austin that can add value to its members by having super high signal, low noise conversations and of a network, and in the meantime help push crypto in Austin, both politically, economically, with artists, etc. So yeah, the purpose of Atx Dao, I guess, is to create some a formal governance structure around a social group. I'm sure everyone in crypto is in a handful of Telegram groups, and over time they fizzle out and they the conversations started to deteriorate. So with the DAO kind of social structure and contract, I think we can kind of tighten up the screws and make sure when things start to veer, we can propose against or for things that we like or don't like. And so in that sense, Atx Dao sort of presented itself as a solution for sort of the social network in Austin. Where the NFTs come into play is, okay, how do you become a member of the DAO? And so in this contract, it's very egalitarian in that a network of people, each individual is sort of a participant in a network, a node in a broader network. And so NFTs work well in that you're one node in this network of people. NFT, you're one NFT. With tokens, you can have people that own thousands of tokens in one token. And for governance, that means that some people have a lot more say than others. So the double-edged sword of NFTs is that, you're one person, you are one member of this network, and you have a say.
And I think it really brings balance to these different systems. And there's a couple different ways that it brings balance. One, if you're earning NFTs, either with different rarity or multiple NFTs, right, you can earn multiple iterative votes or responsibilities. That doesn't mean that the tokens themselves, like a fungible token supply, wouldn't also be useful, right? It's almost like, okay, those that have the economics have one set of votes. Those that are doing the work and that are kind of merit-based, rising in the ranks, either because they were early or they've added a lot of value. One way to recognize that could be through NFTs. So you can create these multi-tier governance structures with checks and balances.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
And a lot of what I think is exciting with DAOs in general and the convergence of DAOs and NFTs is that there's a lot of experiments in like what is the global constitution going to be for, or constitutions plural going to be for like different areas of the metaverse, because borders are, the physical world's borders are starting to become less relevant for certain, online activity. Not saying not to follow any of the existing financial rules or anything like that, but in terms of like how society is organized, I think there's a different set of rules that's starting to emerge. So what have you? Take us through just the DAO and NFT stack in terms of, someone says ATX DAO is really cool. I want to do, I think Denver might have one as well, but like I want to do Scottsdale DAO when I get home from like ETH Denver, whatever. I mean, where would they start, and what were some of the kind of key learnings early on as you went through the early iteration, getting this group together?
Yeah, step one, I guess, not just with DAOs, across anything, is like, what chain do you want to be on? Because that sort of already funnels you into the set of tools that you can now use. For us, although Ethereum is rather expensive, it's battle tested. With DAO tooling being so young, Ethereum has the most mature, and that's relative.
Very relative.
The most mature set of tools. And so it just seemed like a safe bet as the ecosystem evolves. So step one, identify the chain.
Now, is that inclusive of layer 2? When you say Ethereum, is this Ethereum proper on L1, or is this anything that's EVM compatible?
This is Ethereum mainnet L1.
Yep.
We looked at L2s, but even so, L2 is still infancy.
Because many people have been starting to talk about Solana because of the throughput and the different set of trade-offs that chain has made for DAOs in particular. And then obviously some layer 2 voting and even like ZK implementations for things like off-chain voting, bringing that on-chain. Not going to happen at L1. It's going to probably be through some roll-up. Okay, so Ethereum L1, it's expensive. Deal with it. This is the world we live in for right now. What comes next?
Yeah, I think finding out, okay, what problems are we trying to solve? The first is self-governance. So how do we vote? So for us, the gasless option is Snapshot. They've gained pretty good traction, and I wouldn't say they're industry standard, but for anything that's off-chain, they've become a really easy solution. They plug into your ENS domain. People can create proposals, you can add descriptions, and you can add different voting strategies. So in the example of an NFT, you can set that, this ERC 721 contract, the NFT collection, each NFT is one vote. So you can kind of customize that, and we talked about maybe there's layers to that, different traits, and so you can customize how that voting power gets derived, whether it's tokens or ERC20 tokens or NFTs. In any case, Snapshot provides a pretty easy mechanism for governance and voting and proposing. The other tool is a lot of times, almost all the time, DAOs involve money, right? How can you fuel the DAO? And so how do you manage the money? Now that you can figure out what to do, how do you kind of put the bank account in place to be able to do those things. And No So Safe is a very common option that's in the space, and it requires a set of multi-sig signers to be on the safe. And so a set number of individuals are designated to be the approvers, if you will, of transactions in this treasury. But I think treasury management is a big piece to a DAO, because ultimately the money is super important. And if the money disappears, the DAO disappears. So I think those are like the two big considerations. There's different ways you could do both. And I think all the tools that fall in between, like how do you do task management, documentation, et cetera, there is a lot more options. And there it gets a little bit more bespoke to what is your use case. But for the most part, I think the two big pillars to solve for is how do you manage the money and the funds, and how do you manage the governance. So the autonomous piece is really important.
So governance is kind of a loaded term, and we've talked about this within the context of the governor product that we have. But when I think a lot of people think about governance in the real world, it's like board level decision making or management, level decision making. In reality, every single decision within a DAO is a proxy vote of sorts. So how you subdelegate authority is one of the missing pieces of high functioning decentralized organizations that have more than a few contributors. And I'm curious how you've seen like subdelegation work, if at all, right? Or like what mechanisms have been built for actually divvying up responsibilities and incentivizing people to work on different components of these protocols, and then whether there has been any progress made in terms of actually selecting people that can be contributors, right? Because in some respects, it is much more of a meritocratic system to get involved with DAOs. But I'm skeptical that you're getting the very best people available versus the people that were early. And there's not really a good way to kind of monitor that over time, other than just loose community consensus in Discord channels. It's not like an HR performance management system, right? So like what's missing there in the 100 different shades of like how you think about governance beyond just like a director level decision?
With
I almost said 50 Shades of Grey, and then I was like, that's not the right reference I'm looking for.
My brain also went there. But I also deviated.
You saw me dancing around that in real time, right?
So your first point was around the decision making being very different, right? With the traditional Web2 companies, the board approves, and the decisions are top down. With DAOs, they're almost inverted. It can be bottom up, and there has to be consensus across all the people. So in that sense, it's very different. And then having it be bottom up means there's a lot more breadth to the decision making, which adds a lot of complexity. Centralization is good because if the CEO says, let's do this, you're moving very fast. He said it, we're going, right? With the decentralized approach where you go bottom up.
I wish it were that easy.
It can be. Just depends how heavy your iron fist is. Yours is light, apparently. But with more individuals, it creates a lot of noise. How can you get 1,000 people to all agree on one thing? And so I think part of that is we've seen the resolution that some DAOs have gone into is sub-DAOs. You can sort of compartmentalize a specific portion of the DAO and give them responsibilities such that responsibility is theirs and theirs alone, so that not everyone has to concern themselves with it. So it's almost creating centralization around people and what matters in a specific context, without creating this more global centralization around the C-suite, if you will. So sub-DAOs is an interesting solution to that problem. People call it different things. They can be less formal as a committee, so to speak. But I think that's an ongoing challenge is how do you find that middle ground where you want to move quick, have decisions be made by the people that can have the best input. But then it goes into your question, who has the best input? How do you find the people with the best input? How do you attract the people with the best input or the best intent or the best ability to execute on said mission of a DAO? And that's a hard thing to answer.
As you know, this is where I'm getting obsessed with persisting NFTs, non-transferable NFTs. We've seen the evolution of bounty boards and trying to get people enticed to participate. But even so, it is really hard to filter and find the best.
But ultimately, I think that's a problem that not only exists in Web 2 with us hiring engineers, companies hiring good talent, but in DAOs too. How do you find the right people? So I think the open contribution aspect makes it easy because anyone can throw their hat in the ring. And it is very merit based, right? A lot of with DAOs, there's no one's reading resumes.
Yeah.
Right. What have you built? What have you contributed? What can you contribute? And so in that sense, I think it moves faster and it lowers a lot of barriers for people.
Taking a step back, a number of folks this week in ETH Denver might be coming from a Web 2 world, and are hearing a lot of these keywords being thrown around, and people know that there is a decentralized aspect to DAOs and decentralized aspect to this space in general. But from your perspective, why DAOs? What is the attraction here of organizing in a decentralized organization way as opposed to a centralized?
Yeah, DAOs are interesting in that, I mean, you can create a DAO for anything. I've heard last night someone tells me about Fry's DAO that raised $5 million to buy franchises, right? The Constitution DAO, try to buy the Constitution. So DAOs are interesting. You can move super quick. You don't have to create a Delaware entity. You don't have to pay for all these costs. There's very little overhead.
Well, that's debatable, but yes, in theory.
Gary, sorry. Until it matters, you can move really quick. And so I think in that sense, DAOs are interesting in that you can find a use case, and if there's enough interest with people, you can sort of create this structure or this organization with this huge added benefit of on-chain traceability, transparency, and voting and governance. And so you can create this really quick social construct, an on-chain construct of a DAO. Could be days, could be hours. So in that sense, I think DAOs have a lot of power in bringing people together. And the decentralized piece is very key because you can have people all over the world that can agree on something and get together to solve a problem. That becomes really hard with a company. And so in that sense, we're really embracing the decentralized remote nature of the world and formalizing it into a non-chain entity that can then move really quickly and be flexible.
So you have a community and there's a purpose for that community.
Yeah.
You form a decentralized entity in order to organize that community around. How do you keep a DAO alive? So to give you some context around here is so community is made of people, and people by nature are hard to organize. So there might be an incentive at first of, hey, we're going to do something, and you touch on the financial aspect. There's surely, in order to do something big, you need some finance to be allocated around. But also, how do you find the key members? But or maybe more intrinsically, that reasoning of existence, such that DAOs keep on prospering. So maybe an example with your DAO, the Atx Dao.
Yeah.
What keeps it alive?
Yeah, I think people have to be aligned on a mission, and if they're firm believers, then they will drive towards that mission. And so I think the two key pieces is unity across the community, and they feel that they're all striving towards the same goal. So I think aligning the vision is really important because if you're going in all sorts of different directions, people will just fringe out. And so I think getting the community together and feeling a true sense of community, like you belong to something for a greater cause, I think is super important. But the second piece is, that only works for so long. People will begin to either be burnt out, or you have to have some sort of underlying incentive to keep going, whether that's, social capital or actual capital and investment, from like an investment perspective. But I think the incentive piece is key, and that comes in a lot of different shapes and forms. But being a contributor to something, we work because we get paid. In a DAO, when you put it in work, how are you getting paid? And that comes in a lot of forms, but that incentive piece is important to keep the wheels moving.
In terms of developer tooling, so if now we found a community, we found a reason for being a raison d'être, and now I want to build this. So what are the toolings that are available now, and what do you, if people have just a day or two to hack on this, how would you build something like this?
Yeah, from a DAO perspective, you don't actually need to be an on-chain and like an actual on-chain smart contract to start a DAO. You can operate really with Snapshot and your treasury, or more informally. Some DAOs start super informally as like Telegram polls, right? And then you begin to become more formal as you scale. But in terms of tooling, there's quite a bit. On the Ethereum side, I can speak to it. And I think a lot of people have talked about it, but hard hat in terms of if you're deploying any contracts, whether it be NFTs, your governance contract, etc. Hard hat has made that really easy. From from like an RPC provider, meaning when you want to deploy something to the chain, you have to go through someone, unless you want to go through it yourself, but through a provider that will actually deploy your contract to the chain. And in that sense, Ethereum has come a long way with a lot of different providers, whether it's Alchemy, Infura, and I don't want to throw too many names around, but the point being is that the industry has matured enough where it becomes pretty quick. So I guess find the tool of how you want to write your contracts and deploy them, find the provider for you to go through to put them onto the chain, and then I think you can figure out some of the other auxiliary tools around the DAO. But yeah, I guess all it takes is a keyboard and some clicks. It's not very complicated these days.
Hard hat is a name that's come up quite a bit in the last 4 conversations that we've had. Can you dive a little bit deeper into maybe the history of tooling and how that's evolved to hard hat? Or taking another route, what makes hard hat sexy? Why is that name coming up so much?
Yeah. When I started developing, there was Ganache, I think it was called TestRPC at the time. Web2.js was a library that was around. There's a lot of different tools and some better than others. I think what Hard Hat does well is it sort of brings a lot of the tooling you need into one place. So now you have, Hard Hat as like a set of tools on your belt, and you can just keep swapping out the different ones, whether it's testing, whether it's deploying, whether it's running an Ethereum node locally where you are the only validator and deploying things locally yourself. Hard Hat can provide all of that for you. So you sort of get a lot of what you need out of the box without having to go anywhere else. And so it makes your life simpler. You have less dependencies to worry about. You can, use one tool for a lot of the different things you're looking to execute on. So in that sense, it's lowered the complexity and made it faster for people to be able to execute on what they're trying to do ultimately. And the documentation is pretty great. I think that's one thing that any blockchain struggles with. They just build, but no one goes back and writes the documentation on how to maybe repeat those steps or be able to build. So I think that's just compounding in years of Ethereum going on. But Hard Hat more or less has pulled away as a leader in that sense. And so, the community's gotten behind it, and there's a lot of great plugins and things. So yeah, it's definitely a good tool.
Would you use the same set of tooling for launching NFTs for DAOs? Now that, let's say, our DAOs is out there, we have some contract, people are operating in this world, how would you add this concept of reputation and ownership inside of DAOs?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, how would I use that tooling for the NFT portion specifically?
Yeah,
or
would you use the same set of tooling? Would you use another set of tooling? Would you use one set of standard versus another set of standard?
Yep. Yeah, I think you can very well just use Hard Hat for the NFT side as well. NFTs are a little different in where it's a far less technical crowd. And so obviously art being a big piece of it, social identity being a big piece of it, and those aren't engineers by trade. And so there's a lot of different platforms out there that allow you to mint an NFT without writing any code. I do think there's value in you owning your NFT collection, your actual contract, deploying that, having ownership of it, and having true control. And so to do that, yeah, you can use Hard Hat. And to do that, you could run through the same set of steps that you would to deploy anything else on the Ethereum blockchain, but for an NFT collection. The only difference with the NFT collection, there's this added layer of like, where's the image? Where's the stuff? This is a non-fungible token. Where's the non-fungible piece? Right? That data actually doesn't live on the blockchain, at least not all of it. And so there's the added element of IPFS, which is outside of the world of Hard Hat.
Yep.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left.
Yes.
And so I think we should end with a bang here. There's so many different exciting end use cases right now that people have been kind of run. Every single day there's like a new novel NFT or DAO use case. What are either some of the most exciting ones that you've seen in the last month or so, or things that you have seen where you'd like to see an evolution of them? and think that there could be like a good opportunity to put together, you know, an MVP over the long weekend?
Oh, that's a tough question. What do I like in the DAO space?
Or NFT space.
Or NFT
Yeah.
space.
I mean, from just like milling about the halls, like these
Yep.
seem to be the two areas that people are going to be pushing the most tax to.
Two-part answer. The first, I'll just briefly on the DAO side, is I love for now the protocols. Some protocols are getting very big, having more community-driven input and more participation, because ultimately people build products for the end users, and end users aren't being as involved as they could be into the production and development of these products. So I hope to see an evolution of DAOs engaging and finding ways to solve the participation issue. So that's more of an abstract evolution and not like a core piece of like, just do this. That's a harder problem to solve, but I think that evolution is key. On the NFTs.
Almost like tip jarring all of like Web3.
Yes.
Right?
Whoever solves that problem, God bless. Let me join. But on the NFT side, I think it's interesting that we're getting beyond the use case of this is just a JPEG, right? Like an ERC20 token is fungible. It's like $1, right? You have $1, I have $1. We can trade. They're the same dollar. With NFTs, they're unique. I have this one NFT. In its most basic form that we've seen, it's a JPEG. It's an image. But that can be different. That could be all my credentials. That could be all my information. And so NFTs can be more than just a JPEG, where they can now be this unique identifier on the blockchain that has information, and that can come in the form of an image. But I think as we think more broadly about like what information could we associate with this NFT, that can come in a lot of different forms. And I think, you know, an image is like the simplest way to do it, but I think there's going to be a lot of other ways where you can now own your data as an NFT. And I think NFTs beyond identity and art has a lot of other use cases, whether it be music, ticketing, etc. So I think we're still trying to scratch the surface on all those other use cases, but you know, JPEG is the tip of the iceberg.
I could not agree more. I think what I'm excited about with NFTs, I do have a doodle, and that's you know, I'm never ever getting rid of it, because when I bought it, it was low, and now it's worth much more. I think because I got involved in the project.
Likely.
No, yeah.
Likely.
So my Twitter following is smart, because that was like the winner when I had looked into this in the fall, and it's and obviously it was a good one to participate in. But you guys have heard me just rant about this internally at this point. But NFTs as like micro credentials and like composable credentials,
Yep.
I think that is going to be the backbone for identity in Web3. And what's really missing right now is the ability to do that in a very scalable environment, right? So like when we think about like crypto's scaling issues and all these like layer one scaling issues, almost 99 times out of 100 people are talking about the fungible currencies and like DeFi, and like, oh, DeFi is getting too expensive, this, that, and the other thing. But I think once you can actually have micro credentials for NFTs, and you can actually earn like reputation points or like what POAP is doing, you know, but have that kind of composable across projects. You'll have, in my eyes, your PFP, and almost like going to a military ceremony where you'd be able to like wear your regalia, or like depending on like what setting you're in. Like if I'm in a professional setting, I'm gonna wear my military regalia, so like show those credentials in this environment, or permission my social credentials, like what songs I own or what like art I have, in like a more, you know, like friends oriented like environment versus like work. And what you can do with an image that you can't do with like LinkedIn is, you know, the picture speaks 1,000 words, and you can communicate so much more information per pixel using JPEGs. So like people shit on them, but if those JPEGs are like provably scarce, and you can start to associate authenticity with like what's actually in the image, and people start to think about that, I think that's going to be a game changer. So anyone that's working on that this weekend, I'm obviously very, very interested in it for how we think about just Web3 identity and ultimately like building reputation systems, governance systems, management systems, like fully going from Web 2 or even like a blank .labs organizational structure to no, you actually legitimately just work for the DAO, right? I think that's kind of the missing piece that we're trying to solve for right now in the industry. So
yeah, totally.
Diran, any last words for the fourth session? And then Malcolm, I'll give you the last words since you're the guest for this one.
I like the combination of NFT plus privacy. I think privacy in this space, it's almost taken a backseat the past couple years with the rise of DeFi, with the rise of NFTs. But I think just going through the history of it, DeFi really unlocked how do we do financial transactions in a decentralized way. So I can take out a loan without going to the bank. NFTs allowed us to have scarcity in a world where nothing's scarce. You just right click, save as, copy paste everywhere on chain. But I think what ties everything together in a really nice bow is the privacy aspect. I don't want all of my financial transactions to be public. I don't want all of my, maybe I own a bunch of art or whatever. I just want to prove that, hey, I own this type of art. So combining that with privacy, I think is going to be a killer feature. And that also ties into gaming as well, because gaming by nature is a imperfect information world. So if you have some NFTs that ties into your identity, the stuff that you own inside of the game, maybe the armory that you wear, but your moves, you want to be concealed behind that fog of war. So combining that together, to me, sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it does feel like when we started, Monero was a big deal. Privacy was a huge concern. That did take a backseat, and we've been driving so fast. I'm hoping, like you are, that we come full circle and we start reconsidering the importance of privacy.
And now people just connect their ENSs to their $1 million wallets.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. And
at the same time that the government is cracking down globally. So
maybe not.
we're gonna have to change that. Last word, thing that you're most excited about this weekend? We touched on a few of them, but
Oh God, I think some of the new infrastructure projects out there. I think as we start to scale the ecosystem, infrastructure, decentralizing the infrastructure is super important. Whether it's how you get data, whether it's how you deploy things, I think having decentralized infrastructure is key. And I think we had centralized infra to be able to move quickly, but now that we're building at scale, we're starting to see some innovation in how some of the pieces in between can be improved. So I think from an RPC perspective, I think there's a lot of interesting things to be done there because a lot of our network requests go through the same players. So I'm really excited about how do we decentralize the access to the blockchain, because the blockchain in itself is decentralized, but the access to it is not.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that kind of piqued my interest this week. And I'm not getting paid to show, so I won't show any specific projects. But yeah, that's one piece that I'm super stoked about.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody that's watching enjoyed these sessions, either while you're waiting in line for your COVID tests around the block, or when you had a little bit of downtime, or if you're watching some of the playback on Twitter. Our team is going to be around this weekend. So again, if you see anyone with Messari M on, they probably work for Messari. You're going to have to memorize Malcolm's face because he's rocking different swag. He's going to be around all weekend as well. And I somehow irresponsibly tweeted out that I was going to be giving feedback to people 5 minutes at a time starting on 9 p.m. on Saturday night, which I'm going to do. And hopefully I will rope in some of the suckers on the engineering team as well. See who can outlast me, because I will literally go the entire night, and these guys know that I will. So we'll see if we get 5 engineering teams or 300, and I will go until my flight on Sunday. But in the meantime, we're going to be doing a lot more of these sessions. So thank you for everyone that tuned in or had questions.